Hi, I'm Holly Agnes Higgins. You can have as many miracles as you're willing to have. Everyone deserves miracles. Everyone deserves these gifts of love from the divine. The divine actually wants you to have miracles even more than you want them, as much as you might want them. They want to fill your life with these gifts of love, as many miracles as you're willing to have. And there are no strings attached. The divine expects nothing in return. There are no duties, no obligations, no debts to repay. You don't have to suddenly become perfect or the most holy person on the planet or dedicate your life to service. No, there truly are no strings attached because miracles are gifts, not rewards. You can earn a reward, but a gift is something that you receive. But that's the issue. We don't always let ourselves receive. As much as we might think we're willing, we have resistance. Everyone does. It's part of the human condition. But you can change that. You can discover what your particular resistances to miracles are and heal them. And because miracles are gifts of love, when you heal your resistance to miracles, you also heal resistance to love. Resistance you may not even know you have. As much or as little love that's in your life right now, as many or as few miracles that you experience right now, there's always so much more when you heal and move beyond your resistance. In addition to healing and moving beyond what impedes or even stops you from receiving miracles, you can actually learn how to call and receive them. You can become and be a miracle maker. It's a quality and a skill that anyone can develop. And when you do, miracles can become part of your everyday, ordinary life. That's what the divine always intended, for your life to be filled with lots and lots of miracles, lots and lots of these gifts of love. There are no limits. You don't need to hold out in case you need a big miracle someday. In fact, the more little miracles you allow in your life, the less need you'll have for the big ones. So what are these gifts of love? What are miracles? Miracles have certain criteria. They don't have to meet all these criteria, but they often do. First, a miracle is something wonderful that happens beyond what you can imagine or expect. When people experience a miracle, you'll often hear them say, "Oh, I could have never imagined that," or "Oh, I could have never expected that." It's beyond imagination or expectation. Years ago, I decided to start my own business consulting practice. I was really scared because I was taking a huge risk. I had a great job and a steady paycheck, but I wanted more. So I did the work that I knew to do to call miracles, including processing my fear so that I could put myself into a position to receive them. I worked on this for several months, and then, even though I didn't have any consulting clients lined up, I went ahead and gave my 2 weeks' notice. To my shock and utter amazement, my HR manager offered me a very generous severance package. She didn't have to do that. I was the one quitting, not being laid off. She also compensated me for some stock options I'd received through various employee awards, even though they were worthless at the time because the share price had dropped. And finally, she let me keep my work PC. I was stunned by all of this. It was so far beyond anything I could have imagined or expected. To add to these miracles, out of the blue, I got a call from a manager in a different division of the company. She heard that I was leaving and wanted to hire me as a consultant. I ended up leaving my job on a Friday and starting as a consultant on that Monday, more than doubling what I'd been earning as an employee, even though I'd negotiated to work part-time. Again, this was beyond anything I could have imagined or expected. A second criteria of a miracle is that they are coincidences and synchronicities that change you. Not any coincidence or synchronicity, but the ones that really stand out, the ones that are meaningful to you and thus change you somehow, whether that's a little or a lot. For example, let's say you're having a hard time with something and decide to call a friend to talk about it. Just as you reach for the phone, it rings and it's them. a coincidence. Now, you haven't spoken with them for a while, and there's no way they can know what's happening in your life, but they tell you that you've been on their mind and that they're concerned and wondering if everything's okay. Now, you could think to yourself, wow, what a cool coincidence. I was just going to call them. But then leave it at that. There's not a lot of meaning there, and therefore no change, no miracle. But what if instead you allowed this coincidence to stand out, to be meaningful? Wow, I needed to talk about what's happening to me, and there they were. Someone's watching over me. Someone wants me to be okay. Even though I can't always feel it, I must not be alone. This has a lot of meaning and therefore can absolutely produce change in you, where perhaps you feel loved and cared for, and thus can be more trusting and less fearful. Or maybe you let yourself sense the divine all around you, reaching into your physical world through this friend to love and support you, reaffirming that you're cared for and that you matter. If you let this coincidence stand out, if you give it meaning and therefore allow it to change you, even just a little, then it's a miracle. The miracle isn't the actual coincidence or the synchronicity, it's the change that it produces in you. Another example. When I first joined the corporate world with my newly minted MBA, about 12 years before I started my own consulting business, I discovered that the favorite part of my job was bringing people together and helping them solve problems so that they could be more effective as a team and as individuals. As had been true my entire life, I just loved helping people change. Well, after a few years, I decided that I wanted to do this more directly and started thinking about leaving the corporate world to get an advanced degree in psychology. But I was really scared about leaving my job. I'd put a lot of time, money, and energy into earning an MBA, and the idea of starting over in a new direction was kind of terrifying. But I was really longing for more. So one morning I went jogging before work. I was close to making a decision, but was still experiencing a lot of fear as well as anxiety and doubt. As I ran, I asked for help, saying loudly inside my head, "Please give me some guidance." Less than 30 seconds later, a city bus passed me with a huge sign on its side. It said in big, bold letters, "Stay in school." I was stunned, and then I just started laughing. My fear and doubt and anxiety just disappeared. All I could feel was the love that was all around me, and that gave me the courage and the confidence that I needed to go for it and to quit my job. This little synchronicity had tremendous impact, and I've never forgotten it. It truly was a miracle. I ended up earning a master's degree in transpersonal psychology and then returned to the corporate world to an even better job at a significantly higher salary. Miracles all around. One more example. I'd wanted to move from Oregon to Florida for a long time, so I finally did it. I rented the downstairs of a house belonging to a close friend's friend, and I shipped all my belongings ahead of me. I loaded up the rest of my stuff in my car, and my mom and I took a road trip. 6 days later, we arrived in Florida. But when I got to the house, I knew immediately that I'd made a big mistake. The situation was going to be a nightmare. And more than my living arrangements, I knew in my gut that I'd made the wrong choice. It just wasn't the right time or the right circumstances for me to move. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't imagine moving back. Everyone already thought I was nuts for moving in the first place. It would be so humiliating to admit that I was wrong. I took Mom to the airport to catch her flight home. After I dropped her off, I felt even worse. What was I thinking, moving so far away from family? That evening, as I was driving to a personal growth workshop, I said out loud to myself in the car, "You know, if I had any guts, I'd drive home to Oregon right after the workshop on Sunday." Exactly as I said that, a big truck suddenly cut into my lane right in front of me. On the back of the truck, in huge letters, were the words, "Smart move." I just stared for a moment, and then I burst into tears. I was so grateful for this love and support, and it was all that I needed to give myself permission to admit that I'd made a mistake and to move back to Oregon. The miracles didn't stop there. Unbeknownst to me, Mom and Dad had just discovered that their plan to lease their house for 2 years while they were in the Peace Corps was a risky one. The realtor had told them that they couldn't guarantee that any renters wouldn't damage their home or property. Well, because I'd given up my apartment to move to Florida, I now needed a place to live. It was perfect. They got a trustworthy tenant, and I got to live in a beautiful home in the country for a very reasonable price. It was definitely a miracle beyond anything I could have imagined or expected. And then another miracle happened. My folks ended up coming back from the Peace Corps after just 3 months, which meant that if they'd leased their house to renters, they would have had to have found another place to live for a year and 9 months. But since it was me, I just gave them their home back. Also, it was during this time that I'd started my consulting business, making it quite viable for me to relocate if I wanted. Now that I was free from the lease, I decided to renew my dream to live in Florida, but this time I would do it right. Since I was making a lot of money, I decided to treat myself to a nice hotel in Orlando, and I took my time looking for a place to live. I didn't put any pressure on myself and instead made this into an adventure, taking lots of road trips to different cities in Florida. I actually had a blast. And to add to my joy, my client moved my contract to a group in California, and they flew me to their office a couple times a month. Since the airfare was cheaper for them if I stayed over a Saturday night, I'd extend my trip up to Oregon and spend the weekends with my family. It was the best of both worlds. All this tracing back to a little synchronicity that I allowed to change me, the change being the miracle. I can still see the words on the back of that truck. Smart move. I'll never forget it. Another criterion for a miracle is that they are truths that catapult you forward in your growth, where you suddenly realize something and experience a huge leap forward in who you are and how you perceive yourself and or life, where you suddenly understand or know something at a depth that significantly changes you for the better. Sometimes these truths are painful, and sometimes they're breathtakingly beautiful, but they always catapult you forward in who you are and who you are becoming. My mom experienced one of these miracles years ago. She was in a very painful relationship with her mother. Grandma was mean and bitter and constantly inflicted pain on those around her, especially her family. But Mom kept trying to make their relationship work, despite years of being manipulated, lied to, and betrayed. As they talked on the phone one day, Grandma said something very hurtful and cutting, like she always did. But for the first time in her life, out of the seeming blue, Mom suddenly realized, I have no value to this woman. And I never will. It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter who I become. I will never, ever have value to this woman. It was a moment of crystal clarity, a moment of truth. And in that moment, she knew what she needed to do. This wasn't about her. This was about her mother. And out of her own self-respect and self-love, she needed to let go. So she did. After 60 years, Mom said goodbye to her mother and walked away. It was a miracle. A fourth and final criteria for a miracle that I'll mention here is that a miracle is a transcendent moment where something is changed within you and you're lifted out of a situation or circumstance. Often these moments happen in nature, but they're not limited to that. A sunrise or a sunset, an experience in a forest or a desert or at a lake high in the mountains where something transcendent happens and it's as if time stands still. You sense a glow all around you and can feel the divine everywhere. There's a sense of clarity and purity, and you feel at peace, but you're also filled with joy. You feel serene, but you're also exhilarated. There's a sense of euphoria, of ecstasy, of sacredness. And in that moment, something is transformed within you. Something changes. You may not ever be able to put words to it, but you're different and you know it. That's a miracle too. Now, sometimes you can put words to it. You hear about these miracle stories where someone with a terminal illness went out into nature early one morning to watch the sunrise. And maybe they'd watched the sunrise a million times before, but on this particular morning, something special happened, something transcendent. As they watched the crimson light rise into the sky, they were moved at a profound level. Time seemed to stop, and they were suspended in the moment. There was a glow and a sense of divinity everywhere. They felt euphoric, ecstatic. They were filled with joy, but also at peace. They were filled with exhilaration, yet so serene. And in that moment, something happened. They couldn't explain it, but they suddenly knew, in their gut, they were going to survive this illness, that they were going to make it. And they did. They went back to the doctor, and the illness was gone. No rhyme, no reason. It was just gone. A miracle, a transcendent moment where something was transformed and they were lifted out of their terminal illness. These are 4 criteria. Miracles aren't limited to these, but they'll often be present. Something wonderful beyond what you can imagine or expect, a coincidence or synchronicity that you allow to change you, a truth that catapults you forward in your growth, a transcendent moment that transforms something within you, lifting you out of a situation or circumstance. Again, the divine wants you to have miracles even more than you might want them, as much as you might want them. There are no strings attached and there are no limits. You can have as many miracles as you're willing to have. And in fact, the more little miracles you allow, the less need you'll have for the big ones. And you don't have to wait for them. You can learn how to call and receive them. You can be a miracle maker. And when you do, miracles can become a part of your everyday, ordinary life. It's a lot easier than you might think, and it's really, really fun. I've created a series of 3 workshops on miracles that you can find on my website. Each workshop includes concrete techniques and tools to help you call and receive miracles, to help you become and be a miracle maker. I've also incorporated some very powerful guided meditations, including my go-to meditation whenever I want to call and receive miracles. This meditation is actually in the first workshop, so that you can start calling and receiving miracles right away, so that you can start becoming and being a miracle maker right away. It is, by far, the most powerful and effective technique I know. Here's wishing you lots and lots of miracles in your life. Thank you for this time together. I wish you an abundance of love's magic and love's miracles. Until next time.